This is going to be the beginning of a series of videos I'm going to be doing outlining the lore and histories of my homebrew world of Runera. The lore videos will consist of myths and legends from the world, while the histories videos will actually be outlining the recorded histories of Runera. Don't worry about not understanding certain things that I'm talking about, different ages or periods of history. Each of those will be covered in their own video. I'll try to elaborate on them some in this video, just so you have some idea of what I'm talking about. But I will go more in depth in future videos. The Age of Bliss was a time when the gods walked beside their mortal creations. Everyone was happy for the most part, and many of the continents were thriving. One of the most well-off of each of the four major known continents was a continent called Parazor. Parazor was extremely large and quite advanced for its time, and it had a extremely high concentration of gods and inhabitants. Once the insurrection took place, the mortals rebelled against the gods, attempting to wage war against their creators. And they had become powerful enough to do so. This war was extremely devastating to the continent of Parazor. The result of this war, by the time the gods had left and limited the powers of their creations, most of Parazor had been destroyed or sank into the ocean. An estimated 60% of the continent of Parazor. Very few people managed to escape the destruction of Parazor, but those who did informed the rest of the world that essentially all was lost and that the continent was no more. So, the continent itself slipped into myth and legend, and many people forgot that it had even existed. However, there were a few small tribes scattered across the continent. However, the humans mostly resided in the frozen highlands of the north. There was a rather small, at that time, dwarven kingdom in the Yarwell Peaks known as Forge Hall. This kingdom would eventually swell and grow to an extremely massive size, though they would mostly choose to remain in their home city. Eventually, the elves of Great Reach discovered the existence of Parazor. They saw that it was mostly empty space. So many elves kept this a secret from the rest of the world, and they traveled to Parazor to establish their own colony. They first set up residence on the Isle of Valin, establishing a small kingdom and eventually spreading to the mainland. Around the year 500 pre-redemption, an avatar of the dragon goddess Tiamat would be summoned on the material plane. It was unknown who exactly was responsible for this ritual, and it's unknown exactly where it took place. However, she arrived, eventually, on the continent of Parazor. There were rather large groups of dragons which had made Parazor their home for its lack of civilization. Tiamat knew this. It was believed that Tiamat consumed all of her children that she had given birth to in Avernus. However, this time, she brought with her 5 eggs, hatching them on the continent of Parazor. These 5 dragon wormlings were direct descendants of her, and as such they were extremely powerful. There was the blue, Drak, the red, Loom, the green, Skov, the black, Mir, and the white, Kar. She tasked her children with one objective: breed with the most powerful dragons of your chromatic kind here on Parazor, and create extremely powerful children, and that she would eventually return for these children. 2 of these 5 dragons were female. The other 3 were male. The 2 females were the green Skov and the white Kar. These dragons became known as the Founder Dragons, and very little is known about what happened to them or where they ended up. Tiamat then left, and it is unknown where she went to after she left Parazor. A few years later, citizens of the continent of Tyriku also discovered the existence of Parazor and fled to this location, eventually establishing in the Yarwell Peaks a monastery, and they went relatively unknown for hundreds of years, being extremely secluded in nature. The humans in the frozen highlands were eventually forced south by a powerful white dragon, and they had noticed that the existence of white dragons had become more and more abundant over the years. This forced them to travel south and eventually establish the city of Sidris. This was the first human establishment south of the frozen highlands. The city grew in size, and much trade began to open up between the human kingdom and the elven kingdom to the east. Around the year 517 after Redemption, or AR, a human male by the name of Mirax united what few straggling human tribes remained and stated that the entirety of the continent needed to exist now under a single banner, the banner of the Parazorian Empire, and thus began his conquest and the recorded histories of Parazor. Keep in mind that all of these things took place secluded from the rest of the world. They did not know the existence of other continents, or very few people knew the existence of other continents. Even the Yarwell monks had forgotten where they came from. It was kept a secret. Many of the elves also forgot. Only the highest-ranking, most powerful elves in the kingdom knew of the existence of continents like Great Reach and Tyriku and Winyador. And from here we will cover the histories of Parazor in a separate video. If you guys want me to change my format or do things differently, this is my first video on this subject, so just let me know, and I will do my best to try and make things easier. Thank you.